Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on which class or which block you're in. And I get to do the fourth installment of a reading for you for Mr. Richmond's class. Looking forward to it. So make sure you're paying attention and listen up. Here we go. The chapter I'm going to be reading is called Witch Hunt out of Witches, the Absolutely True Tale of a Disaster in Salem. All right. So, did the afflicted girls' fits stop once the suspected witches were safely under lock and key? Not on your life. And almost every day, more and more people claimed that they were under attack. Those first three arrests had marked a tipping point. The witch hunt would now begin to earnest. By March, practically everyone was sitting to panic. As skies faded from gray to black on the night that Tituba Good and Osborne were sent back to jail, two men thought they saw a shadowy beast crouch down upon the ground and spring up and up into the sky, where it split apart into three spirits of the jailed women. The very next night, one of these terrified fellows was followed by an enormous white dog. He raced home to his bedroom, slammed the door, and dived under the covers to hide. But just then a large cat appeared in a ball of light right in the middle of the bed. And the second man thought he kicked Good Spirit off of his own bed. Dr. Giggs's niece, Elizabeth Hubbard, cried out that she was being stabbed by a furious spirit of good who stood atop her uncle's table. With all her naked breasts and barefooted and bare-legged, oh, nasty slut, yelled Hubbard. If I had something, I would kill her. Nobody else in the room saw a thing on the table but Elizabeth's uncle, grabbed up his cane at once and swung it valiantly through the air and into an attempt to smite the invisible witch. You have hit her right across the back, Hubbard explained. Then Ann Putman Jr. singled out three more witches. First was the Spitfire spirit of Dorcas Good, Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, who supposedly used inhuman strength to pinch Anne, to choke her, and to try to make her sign the devil's book. Next, Anne accused gospel woman who were a member of the village church. Her name was Martha Corey. Gospel woman was reputed to be the most zealous church members of all. But even though Corey was a well-liked member of the church, the Puritan religious elite, certain people still disapproved of her because she had once borne an illegitimate mulatto son. Now she had made a major mistake. She had told people she thought the witch accusations were nonsense. Martha was the second wife of an 80-year-old farmer named Gills Corey, and he and she thought had fought to keep him from going to watch the questioning of Good, Osborne, and Tituba. By taking the saddle right off of his horse, the curious old man didn't care. He went anyway. When church deacon Edward Putman, Ann's uncle, and courtroom scribe Ezekiel Shevers went to Martha Corey's house to question her, she said, I know what you have come for. You are come to talk with me about being a witch, but I am none. I cannot help people talk, talking about me. But Anne soon explained that Martha was trying to make her bite off her own tongue. That was that an invisible yellow bird was sucking a spot between Martha's fingers, and that she had seen a spectral man, being roasted on a spit by a spectral Martha Corey. Whatever that means, I don't know. Mr. Richmond, hopefully you can explain it. The third in which Anne incriminated was Elizabeth Proctor, who had been under suspicion for years because her grandmother was supposed to have been a witch. And who else would rake coals over the reputations of Corey? Elizabeth Proctor, and even Elizabeth's husband, a big burly tavern keeper named John Proctor. It was Proctor's very own 20-year-old servant, Mary Warren. Now, why would she do that? Was she truly ill? Was she terrified by dark shadows in her chambers? Or was she out for revenge against her hot tempered master? Warren had been having or faking fits at earlier hearings and claimed that she was afflicted by the specters of Martha Corey and John Proctor. Proctor was so furious at his servant for incriminating innocent people that he had threatened to burst hot tongs down her throat. From the very beginning, John had never believed that anyone was a witch, and he thought the self-proclaimed afflicted people should be sent to the whipping post. His attitude infuriated Betty's father, Reverend Harris, Anne's father, Tom Putman, and other people who lived with the afflicted. John and Elizabeth Proctor had 5 children together. 2 months after the Proctors were arrested, one of their daughters and 2 of their sons were taken into custody too. The next person to join the growing list of accusers was Putman Jr.'s 19-year-old servant, Mercy Lewis. After taking care of Anne for 2 weeks, Lewis started having fits herself. She was being choked, blinded, stuck with pins, pulled by strong forces into a blazing fireplace, and Lewis said it was all the fault of Martha Corey, the very same gospel woman that Anne had already accused. Like Anne, Lewis claimed that she saw Martha Corey's spirit roasting a spectral man on a spit inside her fireplace. When Lewis struck at Corey's spirit with a stick, he suffered grievous pain, or she suffered grievous pain herself, supposedly because the spirit was hitting her with an iron rod. And besides, Martha Corey's wealthy Elizabeth Proctor was out to bewitch Lewis too, or so Lewis said. Could the girls have really seen such spirits, or did they get their story from the Cotton Mather scary book? Mather had written that an 11-year-old boy said he was roasted on a spit by a witch back in 1688. Or was Lewis remembering what she saw or heard about during the Indian Wars when she used to live in Maine? The Wabanaki Indians had supposedly roasted captive settlers alive over slow fires. Or was another kind of mischief afoot? On Saturday, March 19th, the High Sheriff of Essex County arrested Goodwife Martha Corey. When she was questioned 2 days later, Judge Hathorne grilled her harshly from the start, constantly accusing her of lying. Corey, pray give me leave to go to prayer. Hawthorne, we do not send you to go to prayer, but to tell me why you burnt these children. Corey, I'm an innocent person. I never had anything to do with the witchcraft since I was born. I am a gospel woman. At that, Ann Putman Jr. cried out that Corey was a no gospel woman. She was a gospel witch. By now, witnesses Abigail Williams, Elizabeth Hubbard, Mercy Lewis, Ann Putman Jr., and her mother, Ann Putman Sr., were screaming at the top of their lungs and writhing around in agony at Corey's every move. If Corey so much as bit her lip, they bit her own lips and showed bite marks and scratches on their arms and wrists, too, saying Corey's invisible powers had made them do it. And if Corey so much as wrung her hands when they accused her, they cried out that she had bruised them by making them wring their own hands. A woman named Mrs. Pope threw a shoe at Corey and it hit her in the head. Anne claimed she had seen Corey praying to the devil one night outside of her window. Then the afflicted girls and they could hear a drum calling all the witches to gather right outside of the meeting house. Even Martha's own husband, Gilles Corey, testified against her, blaming her for some very strange things. It seems that the previous week he had fetched an ox that was lost in the woods, but it promptly lay down in his yard and couldn't get up. It dragged its rear end as if it had been shot in the hip. Before long, though, it got up on its own. Then his cat fell ill, and all of a sudden, uh, fell ill all of a sudden, and he thought it would die for sure. And his wife told him to knock it in the head. He would not. And just as suddenly, that cat got well. Besides, he said, his wife liked to stay up after he went to bed. He even saw her kneeling in front of the fireplace as if she was saying a prayer, but he heard not a word. Right about that time, the children cried out that a yellow bird was sitting on Martha. When Magistrate Hawthorne asked her about it, she started to laugh. Back in Salem jail went Martha. On March 23rd, Edward Putnam, Ann Putnam Jr.'s uncle, and a farmer named Henry Kenny entered a complaint against a 71-year-old grandmother named Rebecca Nurse, who was sick in bed. Everybody loved and respected Goodwife Nurse, who had raised and educated her 8 children to become fine, upstanding adults. Besides, she and her husband Francis had always been faithful and loyal to one another and to their family and their religion. How could she possibly be a witch? Some people thought Rebecca's nurse mother was a witch, so maybe she was a likely target. But was this accusation really a way to take revenge against the Nurse family? Rebecca's father had often battled with the Putnam family over their farm boundaries. Besides that, Rebecca's husband had been Salem town's constable in the 1670s, and way back then, the Putnam family was rich. The Putnams had gotten into a big legal battle with the Porters, another wealthy family, over whose timberland was whose. A constable, Francis Nurse, had arbitrated their dispute, and the Putnam family lost out in the end. In all, 10 of the 18 depositions against Rebecca Nurse were signed by Putnams. But two of the other accusers had grudges against the Nurse family as well. Francis Nurse was a member of the Salem Village Committee that voted against paying Reverend Parris's salary in 1691 in order to drive him out of Salem. And then there was the Putnam's family's 19-year-old servant, Mercy Lewis, of course, she always sided with Ann Putnam Jr. when it came to accusing people of witchcraft. But Francis and Rebecca Nurse had enough money to hire another man to take their son's place as a soldier in the Indian War. Though this practice was perfectly legal, Lewis, who was orphaned when her family died fighting in the Indian War, might have resented the Nurse's family's good luck. To make matters even worse for Rebecca and her relatives, both Ann Putnam Jr.'s and her mother's claimed that Nurse's two sisters, Sarah Close and Mary Easty, were also witches, and lots of other accusers chimed in. So if the Putnam's family, Reverend Parris and Lewis, were out for revenge, they were about to get it. Rebecca was taken from her sickbed to appear before the magistrates on March 24th. I can say before my eternal Father, I am innocent, and God will clear my innocency. She testified a sympathetic audience believed her until the victims claimed to see the devil and a whole swarm of his familiars whispering in her ear. Next thing you know, they said they spotted Nurse's specter as it zoomed past the meeting house, riding upon the pole behind the evil black man. And every time she moved, the girls appeared to be bitten, pinched, bruised, or bent as their backs were broken. I cannot help it, cried Goody Nurse. The devil may appear in my shape. Off to the Boston jail she went. The cold winds of March were fading, but still the chilling accusations flew. During Reverend Parris's church services on Sunday, April 10th, Tituba's husband, John Indian, was apparently bitten so hard by the spirit of Sarah Close that he started to bleed. Services got even more interesting when Abigail Williams insisted she saw the specters of Close, Nurse, Corey, and Good in shining white male angel who had made all the witches tremble. Claims about the suspects were getting more and more out of hand. The next day in the meeting house, Abigail made Close seem like she was an enormously important and ridiculously evil witch. According to Abigail, 40 witches had taken communion together in the pasture by drinking the afflicted girl's own blood. And it was served by the two chief witches, none other than Sarah Close and Sarah Good. After hearing such accusations, the real Sarah Close fainted dead away. Oh, proclaimed the afflicted girls. Her spirit has gone to prison to see her sister nurse. Then several girls blamed the spirits of Elizabeth and John Proctor for yanking up a spectator by her feet and foot, sitting upon the roof beams to harm the other people below. Every day there were more terrible tales of torment. One of the newly accused witches was Martha Corey's husband, Gilles Corey. He was supposed to have used witchcraft against at least 9 people. An angry woman swore that the specter of Gilles Corey murdered his first wife and would have murdered his wife, this wife too, if she had not been a witch. Then 2 people testified that Corey participated in this sacrament of a gathering of 50 witches. Ann Putnam Jr. called Gilles Corey a dreadful wizard who did torture me a great many times. And whenever he shook his head at the accusers or waved his arms in frustration, all the victims shook their own heads and waved their own arms in apparent pain, crying out that Corey was hurting them grievously from all way across the room. Ann's father, Thomas Pubman, got in on the act by writing the judge to report that Ann had seen a dead man in the winding sheet, who told her that Gilles Corey had murdered him by pressing him to death with his feet, and the devil promised he should not be hanged. But something very surprising happened on April 19th. John Proctor's servant, Mary Warren, said that she had been lying when she accused people of being witches. She claimed that the other girls' fits were faked and that they, too, had lied when they uh, fingered people for witchcraft. The result? She was accused of being a witch herself. And that is the chapter. A lot going on in the witch hunt. A lot of different names are being dropped. I'm hoping you guys are doing something to organize all those names that are being dropped, because there is a lot of information in that chapter. Like I said, with a lot of names, if you don't have it really broken down in diagram, that could be a very hard chapter to understand and to comprehend. So, chapter 4, Witch Hunt, I look forward to hearing from some of you as to who actually is the accused, what happened to these people, how many witches were eventually killed, who are the bad people in it, who are the liars, things like that. It's a pretty interesting situation. I'm glad you guys are learning about it and studying about it, and enjoy the remaining chapters. And thanks for letting me read you.